Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Speak Uneasy, a horror attraction and culture podcast. In tonight's episode we take a trip to Melton Mowbray to Xtreme Scream Park, where we'll be enlightened through voodoo, go to a VIP spa, be turned into pies, face killer clowns, enjoy a stay at Ash Hell Penitentiary, take a nice trip to a caravan holiday in Uncle Enzo's open acres, and find out the secrets and mysteries held within the village. Tonight's episode once again features a mixture of live and studio audio, so as always I'd like to pre-apologise for the change in audio quality. It is also worth remembering that the views and opinions expressed within are only that of the individual, and also that they're only views and opinions. My words aren't gospel. Though if you've listened to the previous episodes, I'm sure you're already aware of this. If you like the sound of any of the things we talk about, go out and try them for yourselves. And remember, just because I have enjoyed something doesn't mean you will. And just because I may not have enjoyed something doesn't mean you won't. So once again, get out there and support the events, actors and creators that make these wonderful scare attractions for us to enjoy. With that in mind, let us jump into our review of Xtreme Scream 2022. The first thing I want to note is that as we arrived, you enter into a hub area. This is a beautiful setup with fire pits, food and drink stalls around the outside. The sounds of laughter, drinking, and most importantly scares can be heard ringing out throughout the hub. The central hub very much works as it should. Most of the mazes actually split off from this central area, allowing you to always come back to a sense of relative safety. That being said, you're never truly safe. The roaming team here are fantastic. From butchers to creepy bunnies to clowns, they're all there to be seen, and they are active. They will happily join you at tables or come up to you and say hello. Not in so many words, but in the way that a scare actor typically says hello, which is scaring the living daylights out of you. I must say that all of the team here did a fantastic job of really building quite a festival atmosphere, and that was something that was really pleasant to be in, whether you were in an interaction yourself or merely a bystander to somebody else's interaction. There's always something nice about seeing somebody else be on the receiving end of a good scare, and I think for this, it's one of the things I really want to shout Xtreme Scream Park out for. With that in mind, a good central hub doesn't necessarily make a great event, although it is a fantastic start. Next we headed into our first maze, Hoodoo Voodoo. Hoodoo Voodoo is billed as the voodooists and worshippers of Marie Laveau, the most desired voodoo queen of the New Orleans, have advertised an event to the public promoting cleansing, enrichment, and purity of the mind. The voodooists evaluate those attending their ritual. Only one body will be chosen to host the soul of Marie Laveau and live forever in the spiritual world. Those entering the hoodoo attraction are promised eternal enlightenment and epiphany, with all negatives removed from their lives, leaving them in eternal bliss, with new perspectives on life. However, all is not as it seems. Blindfolded and dark, you must feel your way and use your senses to survive. Hoodoo Voodoo effectively functions in two parts, the first part being a hooded maze. This was actually my first instance of a hooded maze, so I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. After placing the hood on, and taking a grip on the rope on the left-hand side, you are guided through a series of elevations, slopes and declines, never entirely sure what's around every corner, or in fact even if there is a corner. My only slight criticism to the first half of the maze is that the hoods were slightly on the thin side, meaning it did allow a little bit of light in through the hood itself. Although this didn't truly damage the maze, I would have liked a little bit more sense of isolation by not being able to see the light at all. That being said, the actors in this maze use creative techniques to generate scares. Xtreme Scream are very smart in terms of changing the textures and tones around you. So even though you can't necessarily see anything, you do have all your other senses, and Xtreme Scream are more than happy to play with those. Hoodoo Voodoo does a great job of changing textures around you, be it the walls, the floors, the elevation. Things change consistently and allow just enough interaction to stop you ever feeling like you can truly relax. So my first instance in a hooded maze seems like a very strong one. However, the real star of this maze is the second half. Once our hoods were removed, it became immediately apparent where Xtreme Scream's strengths truly lay. The set building and design for the Xtreme Scream mazes is phenomenal, and in fact are world class. This is something that I'm sure you're going to hear throughout the remainder of these reviews, but it really hits you in that moment of being unhooded. Suddenly you have your primary sense back, and my god, what a treat. I won't spoil too much of the maze for you, as I do believe this is something you should experience for yourself. However, there are a couple of key moments that I would love to shout out. There's a really creative use of lighting and smoke effects to generate a room that feels very much like a swamp. This was the personal highlight for me of this maze. The actor in there was phenomenal. Not just being content to simply go for jumping out of the fog to scream boo. The actor took their time and did slow, eerie movements bringing up a single arm or limb, building a great sense of suspense and tension, and then paying it off with a big reveal jump. This sort of attention to timing and detail is what made this scene so very, very strong, and certainly a scene that will stay with me for quite some time. The rest of the maze is also beautifully themed throughout, moving through voodoo villages, looking at voodoo dolls, crosses dotted throughout the scenery, rope bridges that mean you have to change your pace. Hoodoo Voodoo is a very sensory-based maze. I don't mean that in terms of there are alarm bells and whistles and flashing lights constantly. I mean true sensory experiences. The way that you move has to change. The way that you see things will change due to lighting drops. The sounds are there and constant. Even your sense of smell is challenged throughout the maze. Hoodoo Voodoo is a good maze, and a great introduction to the night overall. It fills a spot within the lineup of mazes, offering something slightly different in terms of that hooded aspect. Whether or not I feel the hooded aspect needs to be there is irrelevant. That will be down to you. Some people love hooded mazes and some people less so. But the second half of that maze, regardless of how you feel about the hooded element, more than makes up for it. The scenery, the pacing, and the story of Hoodoo Voodoo is present. Did we in fact achieve enlightenment? I'm not so sure. However, we did have a lot of fun going through Hoodoo Voodoo. After Hoodoo Voodoo, we found ourselves back in the hub area, taking a little bit of time to just sort of collect our thoughts and also enjoy some of the street performers. After a small moment of respite, we decided it was time to head into our next maze, which is Belvoir Manors. Belvoir Manors gives you the opportunity to head into an exclusive VIP members only club, where not everything is as it seems. Let's take a little listen to my live recording to see how we felt about Belvoir Manors.
Okay, so Belvoir Manors. The theming is great. The first bit feels like a nice slow burn. You're slowly working your way up. There's a scene where a literal car comes through a wall. It feels very grandiose at the beginning, and it feels like it's really going to deliver something special. There are some great strobing mannequin scenes in there that have genuine tension as you're moving through that room. Loads of great claustrophobic moments in there. So far, I'm enjoying myself and I am having a good time. And that is, again, I'm very fortunate. I've never been in a maze that I didn't enjoy. And these are enjoyable. There's no doubt of that. And the level of theming and set building in these mazes is frankly astonishing. However, I would have liked more actors.
Belvoir Manors was an incredibly strong maze with some great theming and great set pieces throughout. As I said in that live clip, there was a literal car that came through a wall. Xtreme Scream Park are very good at mixing live actors and animatronics to great effect, and using some really interesting and creative set pieces. It is worth noting that I did have a small criticism in that, of which I would have liked to see more actors throughout the maze. It is worth noting that we visited on a Wednesday night, so not exactly peak season. A little counterpoint to that, I don't feel that the day that you visit should determine the experience you have, so I don't know if we were getting a off-peak level of actors, or if that's just typically how the maze is. Again, I can't speak for that, I can only speak from my experience. That being said, again, Belvoir Manors is a hugely enjoyable maze. with a lot of great things going for it. I'd also like to do a little nod to the auctioneer. For those of you who've done the maze, that'll have a bit more context, but again, I like to try and avoid spoilers, especially if there is a story to be enjoyed. That actor was good, with great improv, and they conveyed the final moments of that particular maze very, very well, managing once again to mix those two emotions that I love the most, of laughter and fear. Belvoir Manors is another strong addition to what is an incredibly strong lineup of mazes here at Xtreme Scream Park. Up next we had Uncle Enos's Open Acres, which is their new for 2022 maze. This was their corn maze, and a bit of a re-theme / reskin for last year's maze Ashes from Earth. Acres of corn and once lush vegetation surround a once popular, family-friendly park. It was the perfect day out for families to be at one with nature. Since the brutal passing of Uncle Enos, everyone's favourite farmer, the family's harmony with nature was reshaped. Things were not as they seemed, minds were altars, health failed, and things were becoming increasingly twisted. Their happiness of brewing consuming moonshine was lost. Their wonderful drink was no longer guiding them through life and the maze. So now let's return back to the live recordings so we can guide you through the maze in our review.
Uncle Enzo's Open Acres. It's a corn maze, my first one. That was kind of cool. It's cool to kind of walk through some corn. Everyone likes, or maize, I don't know what it was. Maize. Anyway, some sort of reliably grown harvestable crop. Some cool scenes in there, some very funny scenes in there as well. Like the caravan trick that is there in previous years is still there. I was pleasantly surprised because that's fun. It's a fun, goofy thing. There's some fun ideas in there, but fundamentally it's sadly quite a lackluster maze.
So the recording there is a little bit shorter than I would have liked, but I think it goes to prove 3 different things. 1, occasionally, my thoughts aren't as clear or concise as I would like. I've missed out quite a few things there that I think would have made that much more balanced, so I'm going to add those in a second. 2, even a Scream Park with the level of prestige and ability of Xtreme Scream can occasionally get a dud maze. This was probably my least favourite experience of the night. That's not to say that it's dreadful. Again, I'm very fortunate. I've never been in a maze that I felt was beyond saving or unenjoyable. There's just certain things I would have liked to have seen tightened up, which again we'll go on to in a moment. And 3, I definitely should never become a farmer. I clearly have no idea what it is that I'm looking at when it comes to crops. So, to just sort of substantiate some of the claims there are some really fun scenes in this maze, and I really feel that should be focused on. It can't always be a celebration, as we mentioned in that pilot. However, if there is a positive there, I would like to highlight it as well. The comedy in this maze is pretty strong, ranging from the slightly goofy right the way through to the risque, definitely shouldn't tell your kids about this joke sort of scene. And as somebody who has a slightly dark, slightly off-centre sense of humour, I really appreciated that. And again, I think it was quite a nice palate cleanser in the middle of what were quite serious mazes. So for that, it is appreciated. I think it's always great to have a maze that has a little bit more comedy in it. That being said, there was a lot of downtime in this maze, a lot of dead spots. I hate to go back to it, but this was a Wednesday night, and there was perhaps a bit of a drought of actors. I feel given a peak run on a Saturday or Sunday or a Halloween night, that brimming with actors could have felt intense, high speed, and vicious. However, on a Wednesday night in the middle of October, it felt more like a leisurely stroll through the corn. And again, this is not to say this maze is beyond saving. There's some really, really cool scenes in there. Some great tricks and, again, great innovation from the team at Xtreme Scream. They really understand what you've come to expect from a maze and how to do it slightly differently. Again, I don't want to give away what happens in the caravan, both in terms of narrative and in terms of surprises. But it's definitely one of the most interesting things that I've experienced inside a scare maze. So although the surrounding for it may not be phenomenal, there's some great moments in there. Unfortunately, overall, I would say we are once again subject to a cookie dough maze. There are some delicious flavours, but unfortunately, overall, it's still half-baked. Can't help but want to stress, this is an unusual dead spot for Xtreme Scream. So far, all of the mazes have been good to great. And this is not a bad maze, it's just more lackluster by comparison to the rest of the lineup. Perhaps at a different event, this may not have even stood out that much, but in context of Xtreme Scream, it felt a bit of a sore thumb. Just while we're on this subject of things to potentially improve, one of the only things we did find that we struggled with our time at Xtreme Scream was batching. The mazes here at Xtreme Scream are so well crafted, it seems such a shame to let something like batching become a concern. However, there were multiple instances in our time there where we ended up catching up to the people in front of us. This unfortunately led to inflating the size of the group, and therefore making it harder for the actors to have effectual scares. This is something that's so critically important when it comes to scare mazes, as it really can make or break a maze. So sometimes it's a shame to see something that is so well crafted fall victim to something as simple as batching. In fact, I want to catch myself there. I said as simple as batching. That's not strictly true. Batching is an incredibly difficult thing to get right. Don't send enough people through, the actors will get bored. Send too many people through, and the actors don't get time to work with the people in the maze. So it's definitely a tricky balance to strike. However, I really feel that the mazes here at Xtreme Scream would really benefit from just slowing down that batching process just ever so slightly. I'm not saying make people wait an extra hour, but an extra minute to get the experience that these mazes can clearly offer, I think would be well worth it. After the open and wide spaces of Uncle Enos's open acres, we decided to change pace and go for the claustrophobic corridors and cells of Ash Hell Penitentiary. Ash Hell Penitentiary was used to house the criminally insane, specifically those with cannibalistic tendencies. Unfortunately, on reviewing the live audio, the quality and the general volume levels leave a little bit to be desired. I guess we chalk this one up to a learning experience. Don't stand directly next to a ride and try and record your review. So, permit me to do this off the top of my head. Ash Hell Penitentiary was definitely the strongest maze that we'd run up to that point. The frequency of actors was much better, and once again, the consistent, excellent sets and layouts of Xtreme Scream were on display. Every room felt correct, and Xtreme Scream's ability to know how to do a layout in terms of making it feel bigger by giving you that long corridor, to make you feel confused by suddenly giving you multiple twists and turns, was completely on display again. Fantastic scenes throughout the entire maze, and good interactions throughout the entire maze. One of my party actually got the most solid scare of the evening due to someone simply saying hi to them as they walk round a corner. It certainly feels like the actors are trying their best to live within the worlds that they are put. Another thing that Ash Hell Penitentiary does incredibly well is the sense of claustrophobia. There are multiple moments in this maze where you'll find yourself ducking, sometimes just to creep through a doorway, other times for long stretches to creep your way through corridors and hallways otherwise inaccessible. This adds a great feeling of being somewhere you're not meant to be. It adds a great sense of danger to the fact that you're lurking on your near hands and knees to creep past these criminally insane cannibals. It's something that Ash Hell Penitentiary uses to great effect. Another thing that I would like to highlight for Ash Hell Penitentiary is the incredible use of music. This is one of the few mazes that really amps up its volume in terms of music. Ash Hell is set to a backdrop of heavy metal. Normally this could feel a little bit cliche or tongue-in-cheek, but the level of chaos and the backdrop of steel and bars, twinned with the frenetic energy of heavy metal, just seems to work. It does feel dangerous. It does feel like you're in a prison, on the brink of a prison riot. Yet everything still also manages to retain an eerie quality, like you're not entirely sure what's coming next. All you really know is that it's trouble. A very solid maze, with great length. All of the mazes here at Xtreme Scream have been of a decent length. I never felt shortchanged by any of them. That twinned with some memorable scenes and a great finale means that, again, thus far, Ash Hell Penitentiary is the strongest maze we've done here. Seeing the quality of prison food left us feeling somewhat peckish, and as a larger gentleman myself, there's only one thing that I can really feel that I need when I'm hungry, and that's pies. So, I guess it was time for our trip to the pie factory.
Well, Mrs. Lovett, isn't it time for some pies? We've just been processed to become Melton Mowbray's finest pies. Aren't we delicious? So, this is one of your big two. This is your people talk about this. This is your high reputation mazes. Again, very good. Definitely the lion's share of actors so far have been in this experience. Most of the scenes are really good. There's really great creative uses of everyday household items, like the way they box you in just using fridges and freezers. It feels great. Some of the dialogue on passing actors was fantastic. As I walked by one of the actors, they were like, "Oh, hairy pie, my favourite." Mazes, which have been so painstakingly themed and designed and had sets and props put together by someone who clearly cares.
As always, it's time for that fun section where I have to add a footnote, in this case more of an apology. Unfortunately, a lot of the audio on our review for the Pie Factory was damaged. Again, poor choice of recording position led to it being mostly unusable. For those of you who have already listened to the first episode at Terror Mountain, you'll be very pleased to know that was recorded after this event. So, in fact, I have learned from a few of my mistakes. However, I felt that Xtreme Scream was such a strong event that I really wanted to get a podcast out about it. So you'll have to forgive me for some of the misnomers in this particular episode. That being said, allow me to fill in a couple more blanks again. The Pie Factory is an incredibly well-themed maze, using both set design, spatial awareness, again, another great use of restriction down to make you feel claustrophobic. You really do feel like you're being processed. It's a slightly odd feeling to go from feeling like a human to feeling like cattle. Another thing that I also want to highlight within the Pie Factory is the excellent use of smell pods. Some of them are frankly disgusting. If you're a vegetarian, this might be quite an uncomfortable maze for you. And even if you're a meat eater like myself, still going to be kind of uncomfortable, especially since it's you that's being processed. Again, the Pie Factory is another great addition to a strong set of mazes. Something that Xtreme Scream have done very well is to make all of their mazes feel different and unique. However, for my opinion and my money, the most unique and interesting of all of them was actually the maze we saved to last. The Village. I'm going to go ahead and spoiler a little bit here. I don't think I could say enough nice things about this maze. It truly is one of my favourite maze experiences of all time. It actually sits within the top 3. So, with that little bit of spoiler ahead of you, let's have a little look at The Village.
Okay, so we've just come out of the Village. We wanted to leave this to last because everyone says it's the strongest maze. And gee, golly, gosh, they ain't lying. That's a great maze. That is a genuinely great maze. Great use of transitions to scenes. It's cohesive, it makes sense. There's not too many bits of like random bullshit in there. That all felt very cohesive. That final scene in the church is absolutely stunning. Front to back, like, that is a wonderful experience. Front to back, it maintains its pace well. There's good moments of downtime when you just need them to reset. That is a masterfully crafted maze with a good story, good effects, good moments, effective jumps. Like, yeah, just that is a really, really good maze.
As I said, spoilers, that might be one of my favourite mazes of all time. In fact, there's no might about it, it certainly is. The Village really is a very special experience, and one that I wholeheartedly recommend you to come down to Xtreme Scream to try. That being said, there are many reasons to come down to Xtreme Scream. You get a world-class suite of mazes, including, as I said, the highlight, The Village, which I truly believe to be one of the most unique and interesting mazes that I personally have ever done. The hub area cultivates a great feeling of party and festival. It's a great spot to have a few beers with some friends in between mazes, if that's your forte. And if not, if you just like having some food and watching some shows, that's there too. Xtreme Scream really is a complete package in terms of scare events, and certainly one of my favourites in the UK now. And I can't wait to see what this incredibly inventive team of performers and designers do. Will they ever top The Village? I'm not so sure. But as long as the village remains, and as long as they keep pushing their ideas and pushing the boundaries, I'll be more than excited to come back again next year. Thank you very much for listening to the episode, and that was our review of Xtreme Scream 2022. If you do have any feedback, feel free to email the speakuneasypod@aol.com, or you can find us on Twitter or Instagram @thespeakuneasy. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and as always, take care and stay scared.